Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Tompkin School for the Dearly Departed, a Supernatural Academy Trilogy, Book 2 by Tabi Slick, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, and so it begins. Cain. "Thought you'd get away, did ya?" a man taunted, waving the pitchfork in hand. "You demon!" I tossed in my sleep, unable to rest, as the events we'd witnessed last year tormented me in my dreams. After using Mr. Valkyrian's key to unlock the library door, Izzy and I had somehow stepped into the year 1911, where we'd witnessed the Nightwalker's murder, Edwin. We couldn't stop it. Our powers only worked when it was close to the full moon. "He's using his magic," the Nightwalker's voice echoed in my nightmare. "Stop him!" A gun sounded through the air, and the forest burst into flames. Suddenly, my dream changed, and a cloaked stranger appeared in the distance, floating towards me. Taking a step closer to the figure, my body twisted in pain, and I fell to my knees. A dark voice hissed in my head. "We will fight you. We will devour you, and we will triumph over you." I cried out, the words stinging my body like 1,000 knives were thrown at my head. I was acutely aware that this was a dream because I was certain that black-cloaked figure hadn't been there when we time-traveled. "Who are you?" I managed to gasp. The figure hidden behind the black cloak didn't respond. "No!" Izzy's voice cried from the distance. This wasn't right. Wasn't she right beside me? And this cloaked figure hadn't been there last year, so why was he showing up in my dreams? The pain subsided, and I was able to pick myself up. Pushing off the ground, I wanted to see who was underneath the cloak, but Izzy's heart pulled me in the opposite direction. Before I had a chance to pull the hood back on the figure, the world around me rippled as it had before, and soon the darkness was replaced by the setting sun. The cloaked figure vanished as the world changed. "He's gone," I heard myself say, but my lips hadn't moved. Suddenly, a fire ignited in my hands as a falling sensation took over me. This was definitely not my power. Only Iz had the power of fire. My heart skipped a beat before the free-fall sensation subsided. The flames dissipated, smoke rising from the palms of my hands. Was it even safe to touch my face? I chuckled at the thought. What a weird thing to be concerned about. "Lawrence," I gasped, but it wasn't my voice at all. It was my sister's. "What do you want?" My voice came from beside me, and I looked over to see myself. "What the hell?" I cried. Glancing down, I saw my sister's body. "Gross." Her voice growled in my thoughts. "Get out of my head!" How? I didn't even know how I had transferred my consciousness to hers in the first place. Another thought crept in, and I was shivered. Was this only in my dream? Or was I actually communicating to my sister in my sleep? I didn't know which was worse. Shaking my head, my heart flip-flopped as the falling sensation returned, and soon I was back in my own body. "Sorry," I sent my thoughts to her. Izzy rolled her eyes and returned her attention back to Lawrence, or Choice, something like that. "How are you here?" Izzy asked. "I felt your pull," Choice replied, shoving his hands in his jeans. "I felt your heartbeat before, but it wasn't as strong as it is now. I had to come and see if it was true." "If what's true?" I asked. I knew for sure that this part wasn't part of the conversation. I remembered talking about this before winter break. "You and your sister are the most powerful shifters I've ever sensed." Choice paused, leaning against a tree trunk. "Wait, you've sensed others out there?" Izzy asked. "Some, yes, but their heartbeats are different, weaker. Yours are undeniably powerful." "But how are you not like 100 years old?" I asked. "He must have followed us from the past," Izzy shrugged. Choice shook his head. "I didn't follow you, and I am well over 100. "You don't look it." Izzy folded her arms. Choice laughed. "You two have a lot to learn about us." "So what do you want?" I asked. "You and your sister are going to use that nifty little time-traveling to the past power to save my brother." These were the last words I heard, as fire engulfed my entire body. Twisting in agony, everything around me dissolved into nothingness. The dark, cloaked figure flew by me, and I tried to reach for him, but my world began to spin. Closing my eyes, I tried to wake up. I needed to wake up, but kept me in this dream state. The pain subsided, and I carefully opened my eyes. I wasn't in the forest anymore, but on a sidewalk. Scanning my surroundings, I recognized the street I was on and the waft of something rotten that lingered in the air from the natural spring. I was on First Street in the nearby town Sulphur. But why? Across the street, a building lay in shambles as fresh smoke emanated from the ground above it. A swoosh of air moved just above me, and looking up to the blue sky, a man and a woman with giant black wings like my own flew away. How was that possible? It wasn't even the full moon yet. Their heartbeats pounded in my chest, and I longed to be with them, but they disappeared before I could call out to them. The ground shook below me, and suddenly everything vanished as I fell into darkness. I woke up with a start, my entire body covered in sweat. What a messed up dream. Ever since Iz and I'd met Lawrence last school year, we'd been having the exact same dream. Over and over again, we witnessed Edwin, Lawrence's brother, die at the hands of the Nightwalkers. Then we would travel back to our present day, only to find Lawrence there, now calling himself Choice, demanding that we help him save his brother. I also kept dreaming about this huge mansion on First Street that I knew didn't exist in Sulphur. It also seemed like Izzy and I could communicate with each other in our dreams, as if we were living a second life while asleep. It was exhausting, to say the least. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, pressing the little button on my nightstand as the drapes opened. Gazing out the window, I blinked as the bright sun shone through the bustling streets of New York, cascading into my bedroom. I'd been in the city all summer, staying with my aunt and uncle in their townhouse while working a student internship as a music journalist. It wasn't anything fancy, but it kept me busy. The best part about it was that it gave me a chance to discover a variety of new bands to add to my playlist while getting paid for it. Not that the pay was anything to brag about, and there were a few tasks that weren't fun, like coffee runs and picking up dry cleaning for the VIPs. But I figured that was why a business would hire an intern in the first place. At any rate, it was better than staying at my dad's house with his slut wife. Izzy had decided to stay in Oklahoma instead of coming back to the city. She wanted to stay with Lee. At first, I thought it would be awesome because I'd get a break from all the mind jumping and telepathy, but distance had proven to not hinder our abilities around the full moon. We had to learn how to control our powers somehow. Unfortunately, the local bookstore didn't sell the latest copy of How Not to Jump Into Your Twin Sister's Brain for Dummies. Grabbing some clothes, I headed downstairs. "Morning," my aunt called as she ran for the front door. "There's some money on the table for your breakfast." "Thanks," I waved as she left. Sometimes I had a hard time believing she was related to my dad. She was nice, and Dad was such a jerk. I still remember when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. Dad wasn't there. He didn't even call. Later on, we found out he was with his new wife. Smashing my fist on the table, I tried to remove this memory from the forefront of my mind. I had to get to work. I was already a slave to the full moon. I couldn't be a slave to the past, too. I headed to the closest bagel shop on 22nd Street and 8th Avenue. It was my day to bring breakfast to the office. Across the busy street, went out of the corner of my eye, a FedEx truck drove toward me. Its tires squealed as it tried to brake before hitting me. The full moon flashed before my eyes, my instincts taking over as my free hand shot out, slamming against the front of the hood. My feet slid a bit as I brought the truck to a complete stop. The metal bent around my fingers, and I panicked. What if someone saw me? Shaking my head, I removed my hand to find an outline left on the hood of the truck. The driver laid on his horn as he shouted obscenities at me. I couldn't get out of there fast enough, crossing the road and disappearing into the crowd. I didn't need any trouble. How was it even possible I could do that? My nerves on high alert, I counted the days of the month and realized the full moon was closer than I thought. Arriving at the bagel shop, I grabbed the food and extra coffee for my boss before heading to 24th. I glanced at my watch, picking up the pace as I realized I was going to barely make it on time. I didn't bother waiting for the crosswalk sign to light up. No one was coming. Not that it would matter, because everyone in the city crossed the street like there wasn't any oncoming traffic anyway. "Do you have a spirit full of diamonds today?" someone called out to me. Looking over my shoulder, a homeless man sat on the corner. His eyes locked on mine, and he smiled a partially toothless grin. For some reason, I couldn't look away. There was something familiar about his eyes, but what was it? Someone pushed by me, knocking me out of my trance as my hot coffee spilt all over my jacket. Crap! I brushed the liquid off my clothes and ran the rest of the way to the office, throwing the wasted coffee into a recycling bin before entering the building. I took the nearest elevator to my floor and prepared myself for the worst. Being late wasn't acceptable, especially not for an intern. Morning, Kane, the other intern Josh greeted. Morning, I replied, sitting my things at the workstation across from his. Have you seen Patrick yet? He shook his head, but his assistant already dropped off our to-do list. Here. He tossed a pile of papers over onto my desk, some falling to the floor. Dick. I rolled my eyes, sifting through the documents. Love you too, man, he laughed, grabbing a taffy and popping it in his mouth. That's half, FYI. You should really think about cutting the habit. I nodded to the half-eaten bag on his cluttered desk. Nah. He smacked his lips, his eyes suddenly distracted by one of the reporters walking by. Hey, Nancy! She barely glanced in his direction before heading to the break room. She wants me, Josh sighed. Yeah, whatever. I rolled my eyes, chuckling to myself as I got back to work. Hey, did you hear about that shadow someone saw on the subway? Josh asked. It was holding some guy in the air. They said this thing killed him, ripping his heart right out of his chest. My heart raced as I remembered my last transition. It was only bits and pieces, but I remembered the dingy tunnels of the subway, and the man's screams were unforgettable. The darkness took over me, and every fiber of my being begged me to take the heart. I hated myself for it. For this curse my sister and I had to endure. My blood ran hot as my muscles tensed. I needed to calm down, to act natural. Yeah, I shook my head. That's why I don't sleep on the subway. I hoped that was believable enough. With all those slashings and shit, you have to stay alert, he agreed. Desperately wanting to change the subject, I finished organizing my assignments. Look what I got in my stack. The fruit bats are playing tonight. Folk rock? No thank you. That's all yours. Josh shook his head. I probably would have said the same thing before moving to Oklahoma. Country music was still horrible, but folk was growing on me. Your loss, I shrugged. Great music with Nancy. It'll almost be like a date. Wait, what? Josh nearly fell out of his desk. I smirked. That's what it says. Give me that. He snatched the paper from my hand. His face fell and I snickered. Liar. He threw the paper back at me. Worth it, I laughed, turning back to my computer. I didn't understand why he was so into Nancy. Sure, she was hot, but she was too into herself. The way she checked herself out in every shiny surface made that clear. Another heartbeat erupted in my own out of nowhere, and I grabbed my chest as it fluttered. It wasn't Izzy's. I was familiar with her rhythm. A woman's shriek echoed from the front of the office. I looked up in time to see papers flying everywhere, and a guy stumbled back like something had run into him. But nothing was there. A stack of files fell to the ground, seemingly on their own, scattering all over the floor. What the? I stopped mid-sentence when my keyboard started typing on its own. A Word document appeared on my screen as the keyboard continued to type. This isn't you. I read the text underneath my breath. The ghost continued to type. Being so professional, you need to come out and play. Meet me outside or I'll turn this office into my own playground. The typing stopped and I shook my head, realizing who it was. I stood up, locking my assignments in my desk drawer before excusing myself. Racing toward the elevators, I was determined to give that dude a piece of my mind. I wasn't going to tolerate being bullied. Lawrence, I hissed once I was outside. It was insane that this guy could use his powers at any point in time, but I wasn't about to ask him how he did it. I didn't need to owe him twice. Please, call me Choice, a familiar voice chuckled behind me. I whirled around and grabbed his throat, pushing him against the nearby building. I didn't care that we were surrounded by a ton of people. They didn't care. Not cool. For once I was glad the full moon was close so I could use my strength. Relax, Choice gasped, the veins in his neck protruding as he fought for air. I dropped him, shaking off the rage as he coughed. I only meant to get your attention. Well, you've got it, I growled. Come on, he laughed. You need to lighten up. I thought you were the fun one. I waved toward the building. I'm at work. Yes, but you're like me, like my brother, Edwin was. You're a shifter. Practicing your gift needs to be your top priority. I think I'm doing just fine, I shrugged. Oh, really? He raised an eyebrow. Are you truly happy only being able to use your gifts near the full moon? randomly smashing FedEx trucks without any control. I frowned. Are you stalking me? Merely watching. I laughed. Yeah, 'cause that's less creepy. You could have more. He stretched his arms out wide. With a gust of wind, a dumpster on the corner suddenly shook, sending debris flying, and a magazine from a nearby newsstand flew into Choice's hand. You could have more. Yet here you are, being the responsible twin while your sister flutters off the deep end. I don't think she flutters. I waved him off, turning away. That's not the point, he sighed before following me. You need to let go. Trust me. This next full moon, I'll show you how to reach your true potential. You have to stop resisting your power. I haven't been resisting anything. What if I don't want it? He grabbed my shoulder and I glared at him. What you want is control. I can show you how. His brown eyes met mine with desperation. Then where's the journal? I asked. I cocked my eyebrow when he looked away. You've got it right. He suddenly let go of my arm, his mouth dropping open like he was about to say something he shouldn't. It's in a safe place. Can I have it then? I taunted. He ran a bony hand through his ridiculously long hair. All in due time, mate, he laughed. But before I can give you that, I'm going to need you to do something for me. What's that? I already told you. I need you and your twin sister to save my brother. I shrugged. Okay, done. How do we do that? We can't just time travel again. Not yet, you can't, Choice said, tucking his hands in his pockets. But once you break the ties between you and the full moon, you'll be transcendent. I didn't know what that meant, but I was fairly certain trusting him would be the worst decision of my life. But did I have any other choice?